Lee Hsien Loong, Calm Power and Quiet Progress, read and published by Mr. Books. In the tumultuous world of global politics, where bold rhetoric and relentless ambition often eclipse subtler forms of leadership, Lee Hsien Loong stands apart as a study in calm power and quiet progress. As Singapore's third Prime Minister, Lee's leadership has been defined not by dramatic upheavals or fiery declarations, but by a composed authority and a consistent pursuit of stability and improvement. His decades in public service bear witness to a pragmatic statesmanship shaped by deep intellect, analytical rigor, and an unwavering sense of responsibility. Born into a family synonymous with Singapore's very identity, Lee Hsien Loong inherited not just a name but a legacy. The son of Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore's founding Prime Minister, he grew up in the crucible of nation building, witnessing firsthand the hard choices and quiet sacrifices that forged a nascent country's destiny. Yet, Lee Hsien Loong's journey has never been simply one of inheritance. It has been a personal odyssey marked by his own trials, strengths, and evolving vision for Singapore's future. Throughout his career, Lee has been characterized by a leadership style described alternately as urbane, cerebral, and above all, unflappable. Whether standing before a nation in mourning, steering Singapore through economic turbulence, or negotiating complex international landscapes, his responses are measured, methodical, and underpinned by a gentle but persuasive authority. Critics may decry a lack of flamboyance or audible swagger. Still, for citizens and observers alike, his approach has lent Singapore a precious sense of continuity and reassurance in a volatile era. This book examines the essence and impact of Lee Hsien Loong's leadership, how calm power and quiet progress have not merely sustained, but subtly transformed Singapore. From his early days as a scholar and military officer, through to his stewardship of major policy reforms, and in his careful nurturing of social harmony, Lee's imprint on Singapore is one of patient evolution. Under his watch, the city-state has deepened its global engagement, balanced tradition against modernity, and fostered an environment where progress is not always loud, but always present as the world grapples with uncertainty and shifting paradigms. The qualities Lee embodies are worth revisiting and dissecting. This book traces not only the story of the man at the helm, but also the broader narrative of a nation's quiet ascent. Herein lies a testament to the power of steadiness, humility, and incremental change, a style of leadership that, though subtle, has left an indelible mark on one of the world's most remarkable societies. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now, let's begin. Enjoy. Chapter 1. The Heir Apparent, Roots and Rise. The life of Lee Hsien Loong began within the hallowed corridors of political and social transformation. Born on February 10, 1952, into the first family of Singapore's emergent narrative, Lee was imbued from the outset with an acute awareness of responsibility and nationhood. The shadow cast by his father, Lee Kuan Yew, was monumental, not a shroud, but a guiding compass as Singapore embarked on its tumultuous path from colonial outpost to vibrant city-state. Early education for Lee Hsien Loong was more than an academic pursuit. It was an apprenticeship in the art of service. He excelled at Catholic High School and the National Junior College, revealing an aptitude not only for mathematics and science, but also for analytical reasoning and leadership. The intellectual nurturance at home, combined with the high expectations placed upon him, set the stage for a rigorous journey. Winning the President's Scholarship and the Singapore Armed Forces Overseas Scholarship, Lee departed for the University of Cambridge, where he read mathematics at Trinity College. At Cambridge, Lee distinguished himself, graduating with first-class honors. His time in the United Kingdom broadened his worldview, exposing him to Western political thought and the complexities of governance beyond Singapore's shores. The analytical clarity developed during this period would later serve as an underpinning of his policy approach. Not content with pursuing only academic excellence, Lee also completed his training at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. Returning to Singapore, Lee entered the military, a decisive crucible in his leadership formation, rising swiftly through the ranks of the Singapore Armed Forces. He was appointed by the age of 32 as the youngest brigadier general in the nation's history. The military provided Lee with invaluable experience in crisis management, decision-making under pressure, and the orchestration of intricate operations, skills that would become hallmarks of his political career. But the mantle of politics was always beckoning. The public and party alike viewed him as the rightful heir, yet Lee's ascent was neither rushed nor ostentatious. Entering politics in 1984 as a member of Parliament, he was immediately handed significant responsibilities, serving as Minister of State for both Trade and Industry and Defense. With each new role, Lee revealed a capacity for detail, diplomacy, and an almost mathematical approach to complex challenges. His early parliamentary speeches, measured and clear, spoke to both his own convictions and the values instilled by his father: resilience, meritocracy, and the imperative of multiracial harmony. Yet what most distinguished the young Lee was his willingness to listen. He sought counsel from seasoned administrators and engaged with grassroots leaders, embodying the philosophy that leadership is as much about hearing as it is about directing. Personal adversity would soon deepen Lee's character. The loss of his first wife, Hong Ming Yang, in 1982, just weeks after giving birth to their first child, could have derailed a less resolute spirit. Instead, Lee met sorrow with stoicism, channeling his grief into an even deeper commitment to public service. The later stability found in his second marriage to Ho Ching, herself a figure of intelligence and influence, would further reinforce his personal and professional foundations. Lee's rise within the People's Action Party, PAP, was not merely a matter of lineage or expectation. It was merit crafted from diligent effort. He grappled with skepticism, both from within the party and the public, about the propriety and risks of familial succession. Yet his competence, calm demeanor, and strategic foresight helped dispel doubts. By 1990, Lee was appointed deputy prime minister under Goh Chok Tong, making him the second most powerful figure in Singapore's government. During these formative years, Lee advanced policy initiatives that would later define his premiership. He played key roles in economic planning, technology adoption, and infrastructural investments, always with an eye to Singapore's long-term prosperity. His influence extended beyond immediate gains, focusing on the sustainability and resilience of Singapore's systems and the careful nurturing of its talent base. By the time he assumed the prime ministership in 2004, Lee Hsien Loong's journey was marked by a steady accumulation of experience, wisdom, and quiet confidence. He was neither a revolutionary nor a mere caretaker of his father's legacy. Instead, he stood as a leader tempered by adversity, tested in public service, and guided not by loud proclamations, but by a profound sense of duty. The roots and rise of Lee Hsien Loong formed the bedrock of his leadership, an intricate melding of personal history, intellectual rigor, and an unshakable commitment to Singapore. In understanding these early chapters, we glimpse the essence of his calm power, the measured confidence that would later steer the nation through its defining moments. Chapter 2: Learning Statesmanship, Foundations of Leadership. To understand Lee Hsien Loong's particular brand of leadership, one must first examine the formative years that sculpted the bedrock upon which his statesmanship is built. The journey from heir apparent to respected leader was neither linear nor effortless. Rather, it was a careful cultivation, an education not just in the mechanics of governance, but in the subtleties of influence, empathy, and vision. From his earliest roles in government, Lee discerned that leadership required more than intellect. The nuances of handling diverse viewpoints, managing competing interests, and reconciling the personal and the institutional became daily lessons. Early postings as Minister of State for Trade and Industry and Defense exposed him to the rapid economic changes sweeping Asia in the 1980s. During this period, Singapore was still a young nation, its vulnerabilities lodged in its small size and lack of resources. Lee quickly realized that theoretical knowledge, however robust, must be tempered by an adaptive, pragmatic approach. Under the mentorship of both Lee Kuan Yew and Goh Chok Tong, Lee Hsien Loong absorbed the complexities of real-world governance. His approach was particularly influenced by his father's insistence on hard truths, but Lee brought a softer edge, a willingness to consult, to be patient, and to trust expert advice. As Deputy Prime Minister, he often refrained from the limelight, deliberately cultivating a reputation for caution rather than charisma. It was a lesson in restraint, the recognition that enduring progress demands not loud pronouncements, but careful calibration. Lee's philosophy of leadership found expression in his insistence on meritocracy, a principle central to the PAP's legitimacy. In internal party meetings, as well as in public engagements, he drove home the essential notion that Singapore could not afford to take success for granted. The best ideas and the most capable individuals, he argued, must be empowered, irrespective of status or connection. This mantra was not without its critics, who feared that pervasive competition might breed elitism. Yet Lee was ever conscious of Singapore's precarious perch, advocating a system where opportunity was matched by responsibility. A hallmark of Lee's statesmanship is his openness to innovation. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, he spearheaded efforts to modernize Singapore's economy with a focus on knowledge industries and technology. As chairman of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, he helped steer financial reforms that solidified Singapore as a regional banking hub. These were not headline-grabbing gambits, but meticulously mapped reforms that would shape the nation's economic future. Equally telling was Lee's approach to political consensus building. He recognized that effective leadership demanded not just command, but consent. This was evident in his patient handling of intra-party debate, his practice of drawing in younger voices, and his ongoing engagement with civil society through public dialogues. Over time, he built a culture of inclusive decision-making, one where quiet negotiation and compromise generated more sustainable outcomes than top-down decree. Lee's learning curve was steepened further by the inevitabilities of public scrutiny and personal challenge. His health struggles, including battles with lymphoma and prostate cancer, were met with transparency and fortitude. Rather than retreat into stoicism, Lee addressed his conditions openly, invoking public trust and setting a precedent for honesty in leadership. His response to adversity underscored a foundational tenet. True statesmanship is forged not in comfort, but in the ability to face without drama the challenges that define public life. Respect for Singapore's multi-ethnic fabric further shaped Lee's leadership style. Understanding the delicate balance necessary to maintain racial and religious harmony in a diverse society, he consistently advocated for rigorous safeguards and equitable policies. This was manifested in robust mechanisms such as the Presidential Council for Minority Rights, as well as in the regular dialogue with community leaders and grassroots organizations. For Lee, protecting social cohesion was not a passive virtue. It was an active, ongoing endeavor, a responsibility that transcended politics. The sum of these lessons, the humility to seek counsel, the courage to modernize, and the steadfastness to weather adversity, formed the foundation of Li Shinlung's statesmanship. They were not qualities innate, but forged through experience, reflection, and adjustment. By the time he ascended to the premiership in 2004, Li had internalized the quiet virtues that underpin lasting leadership. He would bring to the highest office not just a vision for Singapore, but the practical wisdom and calm resolve to realize it. In the chapters that follow, Li's leadership will be examined not only as a function of policy, but as an embodiment of values, those painstakingly acquired through years of careful learning and steady ascent. Chapter 3. Calm Amid Storms, Crisis Management. The true mettle of a leader is often revealed in times of crisis, when uncertainty and fear threaten to unravel the fabric of society. For Li Shinlung, crisis management has always been both a challenge and an opportunity, a test of the principles he holds dear, and a demonstration of calm power in action. One of Li's earliest major tests came during the 1997 Asian financial crisis. As Deputy Prime Minister and Chairman of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, Li was at the nerve center of Singapore's response. The region was in turmoil, currencies collapsed, investor confidence evaporated, and livelihoods were threatened on a massive scale. While many neighbors resorted to desperate measures, Singapore, under Li's stewardship, held firm to prudent fiscal management and meticulous planning. Li's approach was strikingly composed. At the core was a belief in clear communication with the public, informing citizens of the gravity of the situation without inciting panic. He marshaled expert teams, coordinated with international partners, and implemented targeted interventions to stabilize markets and support the workforce. The crisis passed, and Singapore emerged not only relatively unscathed, but also boasting enhanced financial credibility. The 2003 outbreak of severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, presented a different kind of trial. As the virus swept through Asia, public fear was palpable and misinformation rampant. Li, then still Deputy Prime Minister, was thrust into the heart of government efforts to contain the virus and reassure the population. His response was swift and decisive: robust quarantine measures, transparent data dissemination, and continuous engagement with global health authorities. Li appeared regularly alongside health officials, presenting accurate information with calm authority, reinforcing trust in public institutions. These foundational experiences would inform Li's later crisis management as Prime Minister. Global financial crisis of 2008-2009, for example, threatened to derail Singapore's export-driven economy. Li's government responded with a two-pronged strategy: strong fiscal stimulus to preserve jobs and targeted support for small and medium enterprises. The hallmark, once again, was proactive engagement, regular addresses to explain the rationale for government actions, and careful reassurance to the business community. Instead of radical shifts or populist measures, Li opted for continuity, pragmatism, and incremental mitigation. Perhaps most telling was his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, a challenge unparalleled in scale and duration. As the world reeled under lockdowns and economic shocks, Li's government mobilized a whole-of-society approach. There was a singular clarity in his public addresses. Each demonstrated empathy for the fears of Singaporeans, a willingness to acknowledge uncertainty, and an unwavering commitment to protecting lives and livelihoods. Technology was leveraged for contact tracing and public health communications. But so too was the softer machinery of governance, community engagement, feedback loops, and constant adaptation. Li reiterated that setbacks were to be expected, but insisted that unity and resilience, not blame or division, would see the nation through. Under his stewardship, Singapore weathered the global health storm with one of the lowest mortality rates and the fastest return to economic vitality in the region. Li's style in moments of crisis is, above all, and exercise in steady composure. Where others may default to grandstanding or scapegoating, he exemplifies what it means to lead by example. Factual, unembellished information, deliberate actions rooted in evidence, and a respectful acknowledgement of the anxieties citizens inevitably face. Importantly, Lee understands that crisis management is not just about reaction, it is about preparation. Long before emergencies arise, he invests in robust institutions, scenario planning, and cross-sector partnerships. Regular drills in healthcare, financial management, and civil defense are the norm. Lee's behind-the-scenes stewardship ensures that responses, when needed, are swift and coordinated, a testament to the value of quiet, anticipatory leadership. The lessons of these storms have left a lasting imprint on Singapore's governance DNA. Calm power is more than a slogan. Under Lee, it has become the cultural basis for resilience, an assurance that in the darkest of times, Singapore's leadership will act not just decisively, but with humanity and grace. The art of crisis management, as embodied by Lee Hsien Loong, is thus a delicate balance between urgency and patience, between technical mastery and emotional intelligence. Through every trial, Lee's guiding principle stands quiet progress, achieved not through noise or bravado, but through disciplined, compassionate action. Chapter 4. The Architect of Quiet Progress, Policy Innovations. Singapore's story might have become a tale of complacency, a city-state resting on its laurels, content with past glories. But under Lee Hsien Loong, the story has been continuously rewritten, propelled by a relentless push for innovation combined with a deep sense of stewardship. Lee, often described as a policy craftsman, regards innovation as the lifeblood of national resilience, and his approach to reform is marked not by fanfare, but by careful calibration and sustained focus. The urban canvas of Singapore is, in many ways, his laboratory. Lee understands that any policy, however pristine in conception, must foster tangible improvements for ordinary Singaporeans. The Housing and Development Board, HDB, flats, iconic to the skyline, became sites for transformation. Under his direction, Lee questioned not just how many homes could be built, but how neighborhoods could nurture community connections and foster upward mobility. New initiatives emphasized green spaces, communal facilities, and affordability, linking housing policy deeply with the well-being of families out beyond housing. Lee's government championed policy reforms in education and digital transformation. Recognizing the limitations of an economy reliant solely on manufacturing or traditional labor, Lee invested heavily in upskilling and lifelong learning. The Skills Future initiative, for example, marked a quantum leap in empowering citizens to chart their professional destinies. Singaporeans now have a government-backed path to build new skills, switch careers, and remain adaptive to a hyper-competitive region. These initiatives did not shout from rooftops. Rather, they quietly worked through the fabric of society, equipping a workforce for the demands of tomorrow. Healthcare modernization, too, bore Lee's signature approach reform that is pragmatic, yet compassionate. The Pioneer and Merdeka generation packages extended vital medical coverage to senior citizens who had labored through Singapore's earliest decades. At the same time, new models of primary care and delivery, such as integrated polyclinics and telemedicine platforms, emerged to make healthcare more accessible and preventive rather than simply reactive. By blending fiscal prudence with a spirit of inclusivity, these policies ensured that Singapore's progress did not forsake its most vulnerable. Tech and sustainability have also become central to Lee's agenda. Lee envisioned a smart nation, cities made more efficient and livable through data and connectivity. Investments in digital infrastructure such as nationwide fiber optic connectivity and robust cybersecurity revolutionized commerce, governance, and even daily life. Meanwhile, environmental foresight led to transformative sustainability policies, the greening of urban spaces, water self-sufficiency through any water technology, and a pivot towards renewable energy sources. Here, again, progress unfolded incrementally but inexorably, avoiding the pitfalls of short-termism that befall many fast-growing economies. Such innovations, though often implemented quietly, demand political courage. Li's willingness to engage in rigorous consultation, be it with civil society, technocrats, or the private sector, revealed a fundamental tenet of his leadership. Real change is collaborative, not imposed. Policies are not monologues, but dialogues between government and people, each initiative refined through careful listening and empirical testing. Yet perhaps Li's greatest innovation is his focus on the intangible, the attributes of trust and legitimacy. By consistently grounding policies in transparency, data, and consultation, he reaffirmed Singaporeans' faith in their institutions. Each policy intervention, therefore, serves a greater good, ensuring Singapore remains not just a city of progress, but a nation where progress is shared. Chapter 5. Nurturing Harmony, Multiculturalism and Social Cohesion. Singapore is a tapestry woven from threads of diverse origins: Chinese, Malay, Indian, Eurasians, and myriad other communities. Under Lee Hsien Loong, the challenge was clear: to preserve national unity without erasing the textures of difference. Lee recognized that the social peace and progress Singapore enjoyed were never accidental, but the result of continuous effort and deliberate policy. His leadership in nurturing social cohesion is perhaps among his most enduring legacies. Lee's approach to multiculturalism is distinguished by intentionality. Policies were designed not only to protect, but to celebrate diversity. The Ethnic Integration Policy, IB, for example, was not merely an exercise in social engineering, but a conscious effort to prevent ethnic enclaves and encourage daily interactions among neighbors of different backgrounds. Under Lee, the government refined the EIP to adapt to changing demographics and to confront new forms of inequality or tension, always to preserve that delicate balance between harmony and authenticity. Education has served as another powerful tool. Under Lee, the curriculum underwent reforms to deepen the understanding of Singapore's multi-ethnic heritage among the young. Lessons in civics and social studies went hand in hand with exchanges, festivals, and co-curricular activities, fostering, in each generation, a sense of both shared identity and mutual respect. Linguistic policies continued to support mother tongue instruction while ensuring fluency in English, the nation's lingua franca, a move bridging tradition and modernity. Religious harmony, a cornerstone of Singaporean society, also demanded vigilant stewardship. Lee's government promulgated guidelines and supported interfaith dialogues, ensuring that religious differences never became flashpoints for conflict. Incidents of intolerance or hate speech were dealt with firmly but fairly, reinforcing the message that freedom of expression must always be tempered by the greater need for social peace. Meanwhile, community groups were empowered to lead ground-up initiatives, interfaith breakfasts, cultural exchange programs, and campaigns combating prejudice. Social safety nets, another aspect of Lee's policy matrix, subtly reinforced these bonds. Housing policies placed families of different races side by side. Public spaces from hawker centers to parks were deliberately designed for inclusivity, becoming daily theaters for shared experience. The digital age brought new risks of social fragmentation, but Lee's administration worked hard to counteract the isolating effects of online echo chambers, advocating for digital literacy and online conduct that mirrored the city's real world. Civility. Lee was also unafraid to confront harder questions: income inequality, aging populations, and xenophobia. His speeches frequently invoked the importance of empathy, He reminded the nation that prosperity without solidarity would be an empty triumph, and that Singapore's unique position in the world should be a platform for understanding, not suspicion. Dialogue, compromise, and mutual accommodation were offered not as signs of weakness, but of quiet strength. Throughout his tenure, Lee Hsien Loong demonstrated that social cohesion is not a given, but a perpetual project, requiring both policy and everyday acts of kindness. By marrying government action with community initiative, he ensured that multiculturalism would remain not only Singapore's hallmark, but its guardrail in turbulent times. Chapter 6. The Global Statesman. Singapore on the World Stage. From its earliest days, Singapore's survival has depended upon its ability to navigate a world much larger and, at times, more turbulent than itself. Under Lee Hsien Loong, Singapore's foreign policy acquired a new subtlety, a blend of pragmatic realism and assertive multilateralism. Lee's global statesmanship projected calm authority beyond Singapore's borders, winning respect not only for what the city-state achieved at home, but for how it engaged the world. Lee's approach was deeply rooted in historical awareness. He understood Singapore's vulnerabilities, its lack of resources, its small size, its exposure to geopolitical currents that swirled between great powers. Accordingly, Lee championed a foreign policy of non-alignment, openness, and principled engagement. He ensured Singapore maintained robust ties with the United States, China, India, ASEAN nations, and Europe, never allowing partisanship or dependency to dictate strategic choices. In a world where regional tensions could ignite overnight, Singapore became a valued voice for moderation and dialogue. Lee's tenure coincided with profound shifts in global power. Trade wars, rising nationalism, and technological rivalry between superpowers created new dangers and opportunities. Lee responded with a steady hand. He invested in diplomatic platforms hosting key summits, including the historic Trump-Kim meeting, and advocating for free trade agreements like the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. Under his guidance, Singapore positioned itself as a hub for arbitration, finance, and innovation, bridging East and West. At ASEAN, Lee's contributions were particularly impactful. He championed regional integration, stability, and cooperation, always mindful of Singapore's role as a bridge builder. His interventions were measured yet effective, whether mediating disputes, advancing economic partnerships, or leading humanitarian responses to natural disasters. In multilateral fora, from the United Nations to the World Economic Forum, Lee projected Singapore's interests with clarity and dignity, reinforcing the nation's image as a constructive player committed to a rules-based order. Further, Lee's global mindset extended to how Singapore welcomed the world's talent and investment. He understood that global relevance could not be secured by insularity. Through careful immigration reforms and international talent programs, he sought to balance competitiveness with cohesion, ensuring that Singapore retained its cosmopolitan edge without sacrificing its identity. Lee also paid heed to global responsibilities: climate change, digital ethics, and humanitarian aid. His administration was proactive in disaster relief missions, pandemic response, and contributions to international development, all while championing sustainability and environmental stewardship within Singapore. Lee understood that a city-state's stature was measured not only by its GDP, but by its moral engagement with the world's most pressing challenges. In sum, Lee Hsien Loong's global statesmanship was defined by prudence, adaptability, and a keen eye for opportunity amid peril. His calm presence at international tables projected Singapore's influence far beyond its size, earning respect, forging alliances, and inspiring admiration for a nation that has learned to thrive, quietly yet unforgettably, on the world stage. Chapter 7. Leadership in Transition. Guiding the Next Generation. Leadership is as much about legacy as it is about the moment. Lee Hsien-loong, conscious of the demands of continuity and change, has embraced a role not merely as a leader, but as a mentor, preparing future stewards for a nation in perpetual evolution. Under his direction, the choreographed transition of power became not a moment of rupture, but a lesson in political maturity and institutional strength. Lee spared no effort in cultivating new talent within government and civil society. His approach was systematic yet empathetic. Young leaders, brought into the fold early, were subjected to rigorous training, real-world responsibilities, and exposure to thorny policy dilemmas. Lee personally guided successors, providing them space for innovation while instilling core values essential for governance: integrity, resilience, and a commitment to service. Succession planning under Lee was marked by transparency rarely seen in global politics. Open discussions regarding leadership handovers helped allay fears of uncertainty or instability. He repeatedly affirmed that the next generation must prove itself, not inherit authority. His public endorsement of 4G, fourth generation, leaders was accompanied by a framework of accountability, team leadership, and consensus building, setting high expectations for those who would carry the torch forward. Crucial to this transition was Lee's championing of diversity, not just ethnically and gender-wise, but in terms of professional backgrounds and outlooks. Cabinet and senior appointments reflected this pluralism, ensuring Singapore's leadership could connect with an increasingly sophisticated, vocal, and internationalized population. Lee believed effective leadership in the modern era demanded flexibility, empathy, and the courage to question orthodoxy. Education and public engagement formed the bedrock of his mentorship philosophy. Lee encouraged budding leaders to engage citizens openly, listen to feedback, and remain grounded. He took personal interest in youth forums, community visits, and leadership dialogue sessions, painstakingly nurturing political trust and generational confidence. His speeches often contained gentle warnings against complacency, but also powerful affirmations of Singaporeans' collective creativity and agency. Lee was likewise sensitive to the hazards of populism and polarization, both globally and at home. He counseled successors to avoid shortcuts in scapegoating, to honor Singapore's tradition of evidence-based policy, and to always privilege long-term national interest over short-term applause. The goal was a process of renewal that would refresh, not overturn, the hard-earned social contract binding leaders and people. In sum, Lee's leadership in transition is one of humility, vision, and care, a deliberate act of nation-building that recognizes the fleeting nature of individual power, but the enduring influence of principled stewardship. By preparing the next generation through mentorship, example, and institutional reform, Lee Hsien-loong ensured that the story of Singaporean leadership would be a dialogue across generations, underpinned by calm authority and quiet yet purposeful progress. Chapter 8. Legacy of Steadiness. Reflections and the Future. As time inevitably draws the curtain on Lee Hsien-loong's time at the helm, Singapore stands at another of its historic pivot points. The theme of his legacy is unmistakable: steadiness. It is not only a reflection on the momentous events weathered, nor on the quiet progress achieved, but on the enduring values Lee instilled, foundation upon which the nation's future will be built. Lee's steady hand guided the nation through multiple crises: economic contractions, health pandemics, global instability, often with an unflinching calm that radiated to citizens. His decision-making style, deliberate and data-driven, reinforced institutional trust and enabled coherent responses that protected both lives and livelihoods. The concept of no-drama leadership became a national trait, proving its strength especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, when clear, consistent communication and scientific rigor combated both disease and fear. His legacy is enshrined in living systems, vibrant multiracial communities, resilient educational and healthcare infrastructures, and an economy both dynamic and fair. Lee's policies stitched safety nets not around privilege, but around need. Significant investments in elderly care, digital citizenship, and climate adaptation illustrate a forward-thinking vision that looks beyond electoral cycles to future generations. Yet, Lee's greatest contribution may lie in the intangible, the culture of governance itself. He modeled a form of leadership rare in modern times, measured in speech, unflappable in adversity, wary of easy answers, and always inclusive in outlook. For both friend and critic, it is clear that Lee Hsien Loong redefined national greatness as something slowly crafted, a blend of tradition and innovation, harmony and ambition, pride and humility. Looking forward, Singapore faces new complexities: climate change, technological upheaval, demographic shifts, and geopolitical disorder. Lee's optimism has always been anchored in the belief that Singaporeans' adaptability, education, and sense of common purpose will overcome adversity. The next chapters in Singapore's story will be written by hands he has helped to steady, minds he has nurtured to question, and to care. In his final reflections, Lee often quoted his father, "To survive, we must constantly reinvent ourselves." In calm authority and quiet progress, Lee Hsien Loong has exemplified how a nation can do precisely that, not through bluster, but by holding fast to core values, even as the world changes around them. His legacy is thus both an inheritance and a challenge to carry on, to adapt boldly, and to ensure that Singapore remains an island not just of prosperity, but of steady, enduring hope. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now, let's begin. Enjoy.